is a man with a beard. Thorsten was going to join me on the stage in a minute and talk about menstrual health. Yes, isn't that a topic I think a lot of us should be aware of? We know about it, we've read about it, we experience it. Here's a cool fact. Every month, 500 million women, that's a pretty big number, and girls around the globe, they do not have the resources to deal with menstrual health, something which happens to their body every month. Did you know that 23 million girls, according to UNESCO, drop out of school because they don't understand menstrual health? And therein lies our problem. And therein lies the whole equity justice issue, which disbalances a lot of what we are trying to achieve in the world. And so without further ado, Thorsten Kiefer, will you join us on stage, please? The man with the beard. He's going to boldly talk to us about
Great to be here.
Right. It's fascinating to sit with a man with a beard and talk about menstrual health. I hope you find it as weird as I'm finding this, right? So tell us, how is a man with a beard talking about menstrual health? Share that fascinating story.
The longer story, right?
I think we have time. Shall we? Shall we let him give us the long story, or shall we ask him for an abbreviation? I think you should give us the long story, the real story.
So in my old life, I used to be a human rights lawyer.
I love it. Old life. All right.
Working on the human rights to water and sanitation. And when we started with Water United back in 2010, we ran a big campaign around the 2010 World Cup in Sub-Saharan Africa that used football stars as role models to challenge the taboos and stigma surrounding toilets, right? Toilets, because everybody always loved to talk about water, the blue gold, and nobody wanted to talk about sanitation, and the issue kept being neglected, and that was something that really pissed me off, because data was coming out showing us that diarrhea caused by poor toilets was killing more children than malaria, measles, and HIV/AIDS combined. So around the 2010 World Cup, I used to be a huge football fan. I still am a big football fan, but not as
was.
So I wondered, like the football, first World Cup in South Africa, in Africa, how can we use that to drive social change? And I was asking organizations, can we do something about sanitation? Can we start conversations about the issue so that gets more attention? And everybody was like, no, like that's a difficult issue. Let's not get David Beckham involved in that or this. We keep on working on the softer issues. So I approached a friend of mine who back then was the head of legal at Bayern Munich and asked him if he would help me get some of those stars involved as toilet champions for Africa. And he said, let me give it a try. And first, Bastian Schweinsteiger, who was back then the up-and-coming star in the German national team, said, I want to be a champion for toilets in Africa. And once he came on board, DJ Drogba said he's going to be one too. And he back then was the biggest role model for kids and young men in Africa. And him talking about toilets changed how people would think about it, because if the coolest guy on the continent can do it, I can do it too. And so we did a campaign in 8 countries around the 2010 World Cup and thought, like maybe that's it a little bit, that was great. But then people from India came towards us and said, hey, we have another sport here called cricket. And I was like, cricket, croquet, like, okay, they explained to me. And
you get very excited about it.
Yeah, and make this is very, very big, And can we use cricket to tackle an even bigger challenge in India? Because like in India, back then, 2012, 50% of the population was still openly defecating. Mm-hmm. And we went there and developed a campaign together with the Indian government. Back then, it was a Congress government. And there was a super senior minister called Jairam Ramesh. And he had decided he wanted to break the taboo around toilets in India, which, as you know, like in toilets in India, it's an issue for Dalits, for untouchables. Nobody can talk about it. So he was going to be a champion for a toilet campaign. And he would say things in national television: toilets are more important than temples. We need to build toilets, not temples. And had Hindu mobs, like BJP mobs in the streets shouting. And we started planning this campaign, and we agreed that there would be a component, a menstrual hygiene lab, as kind of like a way to put a toe into the water to see how important that issue would be. And we agreed on that, and the day before the launch, his office told us, you know, we know that he's a daredevil, he dares to talk about toilets, but this menstrual hygiene thing, that was too dirty. He wouldn't talk about it, and neither would we.
Felt too taboo, felt too uncomfortable.
Yeah, and we were like, what? That issue is even worse than toilets? And we had a big standoff with him, and at the end of the day, he said, okay, I'm not going to talk about it. You can. If it flies in my face, you're fucked. You don't have my support anymore. And okay, one of our colleagues from partner organization talked about the issue, nothing happened. Then he traveled with us on this campaign. On the first stop, he saw how the queues of women and girls trying to get into this menstrual hygiene lab to learn about periods, to learn about products was so big that we regularly had to shut it down because we just couldn't manage the masses. And I was standing next to him when he told his assistant, both male, of course, you know, maybe we need to reconsider and maybe we need to think about how that can be part of our sanitation policy. Half a year later, it was in there. But for me, that was like a wake-up moment. There's an issue that is even more taboo than toilets in India. And as men, we're a key part of the problem.
So this is very fascinating. And I'm sure a lot of you have faced this because irrespective of the topic we are working in, we're all dealing with topics which are taboo. Half the world doesn't think there's a climate change problem, right? I mean, let's not go there. Half the world doesn't believe there's a gender problem. Half the world doesn't want to acknowledge women's health issues, even though we are 51% of the population. And then we dive into topics which have been seen as taboos, uncomfortable. We don't talk about menstruation. We don't talk about sanitation. You know, they're supposed to be a private business. So entering into this head first with a marketing lens, it's a double-edged sword. How did you shared with us how you approached it. How was your journey to getting people to buy into it, to finance a solution like that? Because that's a common challenge we all face here. Whether you're a non-profit, whether you're a for-profit, and you have an amazing idea, you recognize the problem, you create the project. What were some of those challenges you faced trying to finance a taboo topic?
So once we came back from this campaign in 2012, we thought about what is the solution to that, right?
Right.
And back then we looked at like the global landscape, what was happening, and there was a bunch of voices here and a bunch of voices there, but nothing coordinated, nothing powerful enough to break through this taboo. And I always imagine it. Did you ever watch that James Bond movie Goldfinger?
Of course.
Yeah, you know, remember that scene where it's a big slab of gold
Yes.
and James Bond is tied, and then the laser comes and cuts through the gold and tries to cut him in half. And I've always thought about the taboo like this big slab of gold. And what do you need then to cut through this big slab of gold? Like, you need a laser, you need to bundle voices. It can't be just one person talking here and one person there, but we need something that is very concentrated and focused. So we thought about what if many of the voices working on menstrual health and hygiene would speak on the same day, would bundle their voices, so that we create kind of like a laser beam that can make a dent into taboos and stigma. Okay, interesting idea. So what if there was a day dedicated to menstruation, like a menstrual hygiene day, like there's World AIDS Day? Okay, when could that day be? 28 days of the cycle, 5 days of bleeding, 28 May menstrual hygiene day. And so we thought, okay, do we now need to ask Ban Ki-moon for permission? Or we just say it exists and see like how many people agree with us and then what happens. And that basically was our first kind of like big project then. We started that in 2013, the idea, 2013, the first menstrual hygiene day. And this has developed over the years into the biggest global campaign on menstruation. Just to give you, doesn't work?
Oh, it does. Oh, I'm seeing it there.
Oh, okay, then we go back. So it has grown really from a wild idea to a global campaign with more than 1,000 partner organizations around the world who use content we create, hashtags we create, narratives we create, contextualize them to their own stories, be it in Bangladesh, be it in India, be it in Latin America or the Caribbean or Australia or anywhere in the global north. Partners all around the world participate, contextualizing these stories and joining a global campaign that then happens around Menstrual Hygiene Day. And this enabled us, this collective we're in collective stages, collective impact model, enable us to drive the conversation from, we see here in the first year we had 89 pieces of media coverage, and we celebrated back then. Last year it was almost 18,000. So the growth is enormous, and yeah.
Therein lies a brilliantly executed marketing campaign, right? This is a dream.
Yeah.
Share with us a little more, if you will, because you did something which all of us talk about in a theory book, right? We talk about bringing both men and women, because of course, there's no solution which is ever going to solve by one or the other. You also have used a master stroke of taking a popular sport-like thing and linking it to draw awareness and to creating today. So how did that work in our favor? Do you want to tell us a little more about how you brought these elements? And did this successfully drive the financing? Like, what was that breakthrough moment for you?
I think the breakthrough moment was to really think that is a collective impact model, where it wouldn't be Wash United that runs a campaign, but where we would be almost like a service provider in the background that creates the framework, like the creative framework and the content, because there are so many organizations around the world that are brilliant in doing the work on the ground, but they don't have the capital and the resources to develop kick-ass campaign strategies and content. So for us to say, okay, we do that, we create kind of like the framework, and we make it contextualizable for everyone. We don't put our logo on it, but we give space for everybody else to put their own logos on it. We don't put our story in it, but we create a model where everybody can tell their own story on the ground. We just do that all around the same day, and we use some common things like a logo, like hashtags, like some visual elements that binds it all together. And that, in the end, was what created ownership of partners. And that means that partners are participating, that they're investing their own resources in organizing their own events, in organizing their own campaigns. And that makes it really like a movement where we are the first domino stone that starts, but there is so many else that make it big. And in terms of finances, I think that is also a big part of what enabled us and enables our partners to raise money. Because one of our big story to our funders, to our foundation funders, to our government funders is that the money that they invest in us in developing the content is not just going to be used by us, but by hundreds, now more than 1,000 partner organizations who will benefit from that. And from our partners' perspective, their story is, listen, we don't need to have the upfront cost in creative content development. We do the execution because somebody else, these guys from Germany, they deliver all that, and that it really creates a synergy that enables us to leverage resources and create impact at scale. And I think another point from our own perspective, what enabled our funding, our fundraising, was, we're working in really difficult times right now. There's a pushback against gender equality. There's a move to the right all across Europe. Countries like Sweden, like the Netherlands, who used to be steadfast funders of gender equality, are now dominated by right-wing parties. And that means defunding gender equality work. In Germany, our government is now shit scared of the upcoming European elections, like state-level elections. So everything that can be considered too woke, potentially, is not being touched anymore. But what has helped us is really develop MHD and grow is our corporate partnerships. Because what we have learned early on, and we've been working with Procter & Gamble for 7 years now, Kimberly-Clark entering into the 5th year. What we started to learn is that the work that we do in pushing back taboos and stigma leads to more demand for menstrual products. Because the more open the conversation is, the more dads, the more parents, the more husbands are willing to dedicate household income to women's menstrual health and hygiene. The more women and girls know about the need to use proper products, the more demand there is for products. So basically, for the whole femcare industry, for the period product industry, we're something like a gigantic market development initiative. And when we talk with our corporate partners, that is part of what we tell them. Listen, we don't directly sell you products, but we are making the cake, the pie bigger. And if you have 20% market share globally, your 20% pie is going to become a lot bigger if you let us do what we do. And for that, we need the resources to make it happen.
That is fascinating. So I heard a few things in there, and I'm dying to ask you more. You talked about, one of the challenges we face is a language barrier into collective action. The other challenge is always translating it into the local context.
Yes.
Share with us how you overcame some of these things. Was it technology? Was it people? Was it everything?
I think technology really is a big part of it. And I think what I just said about like ownership, and I think it has been part also like of my personal journey. I mean, I've been an Ashoka Fellow for more than 12 years. And I think one of the things that is really in the DNA of Ashoka is like indirect impact. Not growing your organization to do more and more, but enabling others to create indirect impact. And I think like that thinking has gone very seriously at Wash United about 7-8 years ago, when we really thought about what can we do to really make sure that we step back and others step forward and use their own resources to work together with us to create collective impact. And at some point you get to things like, okay, you know, like you're creating cool stuff. Your normal reaction is putting your logo on it. If you put your logo on it, you disincentivize others investing their own money to implement it. But if you don't put your logo on it and you tell others you can put yours, then suddenly it becomes their product. And they're implementing it, and you don't have to pay for implementation because for them it feels like their own. And things like that, really overcoming ego, taking a step back, doing things that are counterintuitive, not putting your brand on it, but you know, telling people you can put yours. Now, for instance, this year, for MH Day, it's the 10th anniversary, and we want people to contextualize the hell out of this MH Day. And so basically, this year, we're starting to put all the creative content on Canva. So basically, everybody can, you know, cook up their own stuff and really be creative and play around with it. And a lot of these things take courage, and they require one to move away from like an incentive or a tendency to try to control partners, to really let go. I mean, like the same thing, we also do a lot of work on menstruation education, where we have developed a curriculum that, in my opinion, is the best and easiest to scale and low cost there is available. It's now available in 28 language version. My colleague Lena is sitting there. She will wave. No, she's gone now. She's there. So if you want to learn more about our MHH education work and the free products you can access there, speak to Lena, please. But there again, you know, we put so much knowledge and heart into creating these products. So at the end, they were ready, and we decided as a team, after long discussions, we're not going to put our logo on them. We're just going to give them to partners. And you know, then of course you have some partners will take advantage of it, maybe even sell it, maybe use it commercially. But at some point we decided that, you know, there's always going to be 20% of people who won't play fair, but 80% will probably play fair. And the relationship you have with these 80% will determine your success. And I'd rather trust 100% and be screwed by 20% and have a great relationship with 80% than make it difficult for everyone to work with us. And things like these have been absolutely transformative in how we work with partners, what our attitude to partnership is, and how partners also work with us.
It's fascinating. Thank you. How do you manage the quality control of the product, or not?
We do. I mean, like, we have regular reporting with partners. So, like, every once in a year, they get back to us. They tell us how the implementation goes, what they learn, and what they think should be improved. But for much, we trust them, because there are organizations, they have a very strong incentive to use their own resources for the best benefit. And the moment you stop paying people to do something for you, why should they do it bad, right? You know, like, they send people to work to do it, and maybe they will do it a little bit different than we think it should be done perfectly. But hey, it's their project. They want to create change at a local level. At some point, we decided that we want to let go, and we want to have trust-based partnerships. And sometimes, of course, things will go wrong, but they will also, if you control.
That's fascinating. Trust-based partnerships, and trust-based is a movement in philanthropy as well, as I'm sure you know. Yeah. So with that comes the question of then how do you manage data collection? And how is that, because that's the bear we all face, is how do we show the value of our impact? And a lot of it is rooted in data. And so how do you do it for yourself, and how do you do it for the partners, if you will, for them to be able to showcase impact?
I mean, a big part of that is technology. And for instance, for the global MHD campaign, there is absolutely no way we would be able to do that without huge investments in technology. And we're happy to have a low bono partnership with Meltwater, who is one of the premium companies when it comes to media monitoring and social media monitoring. And they help us a lot. So we have a Meltwater solution that we could normally never, ever afford. That goes in six-figure sums if you paid it at market price. That helps us to really track media coverage, to really track social media. They help us build formulas to calculate cross-reach into net reach. They really put their heads together with our creative directors, our creative team, to really calculate then reach and show how the work that we do, especially around Menstrual Hygiene Day, changes conversations around the world and pushes back taboos and stigma.
That's fascinating. So you're a success story. Tell us what's next. What's the next new thing we should expect coming out from you? And which could be the next challenge and what, or the next innovation?
So one really big challenge is getting funding for the topic. And I'm not saying so much for us, but I mean the issue as
yes,
such.
It's a taboo topic, right?
We're talking about an issue that affects half of humanity, and there's not a single major government funder, not a single major philanthropist, not a single major global foundation that is menstrual health and hygiene as a priority issue. I'm repeating, not one. Not one. And we're pushing very, very hard to change that. So we've been working with the French government, Agence Française de Développement, who is now about to launch a $10 million fund to support feminist NGOs in the Global South working on menstrual health and hygiene. That's the absolute first. That's the biggest commitment to NGOs that has ever been made on this issue. We're working with the World Bank, pushing them. We're working with the German government and have managed to get them to now include menstrual health and hygiene into their gender action plan. We're pushing really, really hard to get more funding. But one of the challenges is menstrual health and hygiene is not part of the SDGs. There is no OECD DAC code. So really people don't track, which is why we have now launched a new advocacy tool that we call the Menstrual Health and Hygiene, short MHH funding tracker, where we look at who funds it and where we put it on a certain, a single searchable database where everybody can find information. So we're providing advocates with the ammunition to hold funders' feet to the fire. And we're providing advocates also with the ammunition to go and say, hey, listen, German government, here, the French government is funding, here's the data, what about you? Tanzanian government, look at what Kenya is doing. It's possible, right? So what about you? So to create this peer pressure between in regions, but also between categories of funders. Because, for instance, now the Gates Foundation has shared their data with us. If I can go to a foundation and tell them, listen, guys, the Gates Foundation is starting to fund this issue, here's their data, that makes it more relevant, and that reduces the risk for them of getting into the issue. Because you need these big flagships that kind of like are inspiration that serve as examples for the smaller funders. So that's one of the big challenges ahead, mobilizing more funding for the issue, for small NGOs, but also for the UNICEFs and USFPAs of this world, who all lack the resources they need. And then the next big thing that is coming up is this year is the 10th anniversary of Menstrual Hygiene Day. So it's, and we're super excited, and we're seeing so many new partners coming on board and so many new organizations wanting to join. And so the big challenge really continues to be like breaking the taboos and stigma and starting a conversation. And we're here and Change Now. So I would call on every single one of you, help change this now. And it's very easy. You can do something that is very, very simple. The thing that you see here on the slide, that is what we call the menstruation bracelet. And when we, exactly Martha is showing hers, when we started to have conversations about the issue with decision makers, especially men again, what we always noted is like it was very hard to break the ice in the beginning. So we thought about how have other issues done that? And we thought about a symbol. So we created a symbol, 28 beads, 5 of which are red. It's round, it's a cycle, so it's a symbol for menstruation. And we've been pushing that as a symbol for people to wear, because if you wear that on your wrist, you're showing that periods are nothing to hide. You're wearing it where you normally wear your jewelry. And by doing that, you are making a statement and you are helping to start conversation and break the taboos and stigma. And the bracelet I'm wearing and Devika is wearing is a very special one. We sourced that through a social enterprise in India. It's handmade class beads, every single one handmade and hand-painted. And my colleagues here,
we can invite them all back on stage.
Lena and Sophia, again, shake, please wave. They have about 100 of them with them. And the 100 first people that come here and give a pinky promise that you're going to wear it for the next 2 days, that you're going to talk about it to a couple of people, and that you're going to post a picture on Menstrual Hygiene Day, you're going to get one for free. So that is what all of you can do.
You can see he's a consummate marketer.
And how all of you can become part of the solution.
I love that. I love that closing. We are all part of the solution. So, Thorsten, thank you so much. Is there any other parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Well, I thank you so much for having me here and really daring to talk periods with a man on stage. And maybe let me add that. I mean, like, that's also like how I see my role a little bit, because there is a bunch of guys in the room, and I also want to encourage them, to become agents of change, because ending period poverty and stigma is not a women's issue. Us men have weaponized menstruation over history. We've written the religious books, the Bible, the Talmud, the Quran, where the taboos and stigma around menstruation were first kind of like solidified. We are in a position that we have to help change that. So I'm really calling to all the guys in the rooms, I want to see you come to my colleagues, get your menstruation bracelet and wear it, because it's something we have a duty to be part of the solution here. I
agree. I think instead of calling it a man-woman issue, I think it's better to think of it as half of humanity.
Yeah, it's a human issue.
It is our future. And with that, I'm going to invite our panelists back on stage.